Would it? Are we ready to go?
Yeah, we are ready to go.
Okay, all right.
So first, I will introduce and then you can start the session, okay?
Okay, I'm ready when you are. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening to all. On behalf of Andhra Chamber of Commerce, I welcome all the participants for today's program. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. John Eni from Mexico, the Chief Resource Person of the day, and Mr. Surjit Rai from Calcutta, who has been instrumental in organizing this program. I welcome Mr. R R.Padmanabhan, the Chairman of Skill Development and Foreign Trade Subcommittee of Andhra Chamber of Commerce. To give a brief introduction to the new people who are joining today, Andhra Chamber of Commerce is a 93-year-old chamber, which is established in the year 1928. And we have a presence in 3 states, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. We have more than 1,350 members. We have 16 subcommittees, and we have 35 product associations under our fold. So one of the major subcommittee is foreign trade. And today we have with us Mr. R R.Padmanabhan, the chairman of the subcommittee, who will be doing the moderation. And so with this, I welcome you all to this program. And I would like to make a small brief introduction about the presenter of the day, Mr. John. He is a founder and chief executive officer of Bicentennial Group, LLC. John is an attorney, professor, entrepreneur, and author who has resided in Mexico since 2011. He regularly presents nationally and internationally on matters of corporate law, immigration, and international law and investment. He graduated magna cum laude from the American University, Washington College of Law in Washington, DC, with a focus on United States, Latin American, and United States corporate law, and was a member of the American University International Law Review. He was previously employed at the United States Department of Labor as an international trade analyst and worked in the General Counsel's Office of the United States Trade Representative within the White House Executive Office of the President. He is a professor of international law at the Institute of Technology de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey. John is an author and public speaker, having written more than 25 articles concerning investment and business in Mexico. His new book on the same topics is slated for publication in the fall of 2021. As we all know, Mexico is a very competitive country, and it has the main businesses is farming, the fertilizer, and retail business. And we understand that there are a lot of products which is being exported also. So we will hear from Mr. John about the business opportunities in Mexico and how people can invest and start establishing a unit in Mexico. Over to you, Mr. John.
All right. Very good morning. Well, good morning for me and good afternoon for all of you. And a special thanks to our country manager, Surajit Roy, for putting everything together for us. One thing I'd like to ask, just as we get going, I'm very interested in understanding why people were interested in Mexico in seeing this webinar. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead as we're beginning in the messages of the chat for the webinar. I'd like to hear just everybody's sort of reasons. Was it a specific project that you're working on, or a specific interest area? I'm very curious to find out. So, so my name is John Eni. Thank you for the very, very excellent introduction. So we're going to go over, some of the principal aspects about getting started in Mexico, looking at legal entities, looking at some of the major aspects of doing business. So let's go right on ahead. All right. So our firm is Mexican Incorporation, Mex Inc. And basically, we've been operating in Mexico for quite a long time, at least for like about 6 years, I would say. And we have clients from all sort of walks of life. We have very large clients who are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We have smaller clients who are starting, very small operations in Mexico. But we have experience across sectors. We're not just law. We have, a variety of services from human resources, payroll, taxation, investment strategies. So we paint with a wide brush, so to speak. Okay. So this is basically an overview of what we're going to talk about today in the various sections. And so let's begin. When coming into Mexico, I think one of the biggest things that people have to do is planning. People always seem to jump this part of the stage. Having a game plan, but also knowing what you're looking at. So not every project is going to be the same when you're entering the market. Okay, so the key element is to understand what is your purpose first. What is your purpose for entering the market? And then by identifying that purpose, we identify the different challenges and different regulations or compliance that we're going to have to take into account. So many clients will come here to Mexico because they themselves are following a client. That's to say that if they're operating in another country, another foreign country, and then their client comes down to Mexico, and then they end up having to follow that client to deliver the same service that they have delivered elsewhere in the world. Is your company coming down for coming to Mexico for human resources, nearshoring, implementation of a production plan, expansion of your market to distribute a service, expanding to distribute a good? All of these different goals or the reasons why you're coming down to Mexico will define the different challenges that you have, right? Okay. Okay, so first, as I said, we have to make sure that we have our game plan, right? But this is mostly an overview of sort of the elements, the major elements of the planning. First of all, there's the establishment of the corporate entity, okay? That allows you to engage in business in Mexico. Then once the establishment of the corporate entity is completed, then we have preliminary compliance. We have ongoing compliance, which is more of taxation and accounting and things that you need to maintain the company running as a going concern. Talent acquisition, human resources if necessary, if you will have employees. Some people don't. Legal protections, structuring the deal. All right, what's the best operational model for Mexico? Growth and marketing and refinement. Okay, so moving along here. What do we mean by preliminary compliance? All right. Preliminary compliance is probably one of the most important things that you will face when entering the Mexican market. And it basically means is any legal or institutional barrier with which a company must comply to achieve the commercialization of its product or service, right? So the preliminary compliance will basically depend on what type of service or product you are planning to market within Mexico. And some things can be complicated, some things can be fairly easy. It just depends. So if we're looking at products, for example, if we're talking about medicines or products for human consumption or electrical products, we're talking about certain higher levels of preliminary compliance that we're going to have to deal with. Likewise, services, right? Financial services, loans, insurance, that's a whole nother level, right? But then there's other areas, for example, if you're employment. So employment has sort of a lesser bar when it comes to preliminary compliance because there's a series of registrations that we have to do, which we will look at later on. But the point is, not everything is created equally. Not all difficulties, or not every product or service is going to have the same level of difficulty, and it really depends. So let's take a look also as an example of what some of these this preliminary compliance might be. So this is just something that we decided to extrapolate for you to use and to see as an example, right? So this isn't, so for example, if we're using a financial services company, right? We want to, one of the biggest areas in Mexico right now is micro lending, right? So between $50, $100, or $200 from your cell phone using an application. So a lot of companies are coming to Mexico to engage in these services. So one of the things that would be required if you're engaging in financial services would be what we call the SOFHOM regulation. So this would be for non-regulated or regulated companies. And basically it means that you have to have a vulnerable activities registration, which is for anti-money laundering, a CONDUCEF registration, which is the Consumer Protection Service. There's various technical opinions that need to be attained from the National Banking and Securities Commission. And also you have to develop a series of technical manuals. So for a financial industry, that's sort of your basic level of compliance that you need. Also, what are the things that is probably more common, which you're more likely to find now for consulting and for human resources, is something called a specialized services registration. So there was now, effective as of a few months ago, there's a new law that came into place stating that you can no longer engage in subcontracted services, right? Subcontracted services is, and I send over my employee to another company to work on a different plan, on a different project, or whatever the case may be, as if they were not my employee, but your employee. Now, you can still engage in those activities. However, you have to be registered for specialized services. So now we can engage in subcontracted services, but we have to have a special registration called an SSTPS, Specialized Service Registration. So these are things that you're going to, some examples of things that you're going to face in terms of preliminary compliance. I tend to think that the specialized services one is what's going to be most relevant for this discussion, and we'll look at that a little bit more in depth later on. So first of all, establishing a legal entity, right? Unfortunately, establishing a legal entity in Mexico is not necessarily the easiest thing on the planet to do, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people, especially when we're talking in terms of places like the United States, where when I have to make a company for clients in Delaware or Washington or Texas, I can send a fax to the Secretary of State, register the company, and go online and get my tax ID number. The whole process can be done really in a matter of days. In Mexico, that's not necessarily the case. There's certain complications and bureaucracy that increase the price and increase the time and the complications somewhat, but that's needless to say. So what we're going to explore here are some of these special aspects for foreigners, right? Opening a bank account, obviously, what's necessary for the company to operate. The SAT is the tax authority in Mexico. We'll look at some of the regulation around that, and also the relevant steps and procedures. So moving right along. Forgive me if I'm going too fast, but we have limited amount of time. I want to make sure that we get everything in and answer your questions. All right, so basically, there are special aspects for foreigners who are going to be operating in Mexico in the way that you have to design the company, right? So I think one of the biggest rumors on the street is you have to have a Mexican partner, right? That is not true. I don't know why people call me at least once or twice a week. And they have questions. They say, well, do I have to have a Mexican partner? I heard this, rumored about. And no, you do not need to have a Mexican partner for completing an incorporation in Mexico. What you do need to have is a legal representative, right? A legal representative who's a local in-country person who basically represents the company for legal purposes in Mexico. And that's one of the things that I think catches people off guard sometimes, because they think that they can be their own legal representative, which you can. But the thing is, you need somebody locally, and that person needs to be a Mexican citizen and registered before the tax authorities, or they need to be a foreigner with temporary resident or permanent residence and registered with the tax authorities. Okay, so the local registered legal representative, and then you also need a local tax address. So with those two things, you can operate fairly without any issues, right? So now, how do you say, where do I find a legal representative, right? In Spanish, they call it representante legal. So there's many strategies that we can use. For example, if you have a local employee, that's sufficient. If you have a local country manager, that's sufficient as well, right? Now, if the company does not have any employees, then what many people will do is they'll simply name their accountant or their lawyer to be the legal representative of the company. Makes perfect sense, right? But also, it's very important to understand that normally having a legal representative implies having a fixed annual or monthly cost. So you can imagine if you have a local employee, well, just include that in their salary. But if you don't have a local employee, then obviously you have to account for the fact that you are going to have to pay an accountant or a lawyer or somebody else locally to act as the local representative of the company. So the local representative of the company is going to do things for, helping to register the company. We'll talk about that a little bit, your tax address, your tax number, your everything like that. But you say, well, okay, so if I have a local representative, how do I make sure that, this person doesn't literally take me to the bank? And how do I mitigate my risk with giving this person some type of authority over the company, right? So basically, under Mexican law, there's a possibility of limiting the certain corporate powers of the local representative to basically reflect their responsibilities So in most cases, the legal representative is going to assist with, like I said, the registration of the taxes and things like that, these sort of ministerial activities. But so we are able to limit their powers. The Mexican Civil Code is has very compartmentalized series of corporate authorities that are very distinctly outlined by law. And so what we can do is we can sort of pick and choose the different authorities that we would like our local representative to have, so that they can exercise their activities and their authorities in a properly mitigated way, right? So for example, one of the most common things that a local representative should have is authority for acts of administration, right? That's defined under Mexican law for, like I said before, these certain ministerial activities, such as getting the company registered with the tax authorities, employment registrations, maybe signing rental agreements and things like that. Also, there's an authority for labor acts, which is if you need to enter into labor agreements or enter into some type of mitigation or arbitration with employees, with the authorities. There's also an authority for lawsuits and collections. So that means basically, if you want the legal representative to be able to bring lawsuits to collect on the company's behalf, they can have lawsuits and collections power. One of the most common authorities is the bank account faculties. Okay, so an authority for bank accounts is somewhat important because we'll see this later on, but there's limitations as to who and how you can open up a bank account in Mexico. And so having a local signatory obviously can assist greatly with that process. And we'll look at that further in the presentation. There's also an authority for ownership acts, what they call acts of dominion. And that means where the local representative, you need someone who's able to acquire property, a vehicle, real estate, things like that are going to be limited to a representative of the company who has powers for ownership acts, okay? Now, in some cases, you can exercise the authority on your own. In some cases, you have to rely on your legal representative. But that will depend on what action we're talking about, okay? So establishing the legal entity before the SAT. This is a very, very important process, probably one of the most complicated processes that we have. Okay, so first, in order to be registered before the authorities, we have two processes with the tax authority that we have to take into account. Obtaining the RFC number, and the RFC number is the tax identification number in Mexico. And this is sort of a de facto corporate identification number as well that it's used for. And then the second part of that is something called the e-firma, the electronic signature, okay? And so you need to have both of these steps, the RFC number and the e-signature, in order to be considered fully registered with the tax authorities and before you can really operate. Because the e-signature is going to be used in order for you to be able to file your taxes.
The person you are speaking with has put your call on hold. Please stay on the line.
ನೀವು ಮಾತನಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಕರೆಯನ್ನು ಹೋಲ್ಡ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಲೈನ್ನಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ಇರಿ.
आप जिस व्यक्ति से बात कर रहे हैं उसने आपकी कॉल को होल्ड पर रखा.
Okay, so the key registrations, as I said, the e-firma, okay, so the e-firma is going to be required for you to be able to send in your tax declarations and electronically execute documents online, filings and whatnot. So now, the reason why this is so important, and especially in consideration when we're talking about foreign companies who are going to be in Mexico, is that before you even finish the company, before you can get your tax registrations, you need to already have a legal representative, and you already need to have a local registered address for the company, right? And this is probably one of the most common areas where people do not properly execute. They do not properly execute the process of the incorporation because basically they go with somebody who doesn't really understand what needs to happen in order to register the company as a foreigner. And then they hand you a piece of paper and say, here's your articles of incorporation. And you say, okay, now you have to register with the SAT. But the thing is, if you're a foreigner who's a non-resident in Mexico, you can't register with the tax authorities. You can't take care of these steps. So before the company is even completed, right, you need to have your local representative and your legal tax office, the registered office of the company, already selected and all the documents ready for that. Okay. All right, so opening a bank account. This is probably one of the most complicated things or challenges that you're going to face in Mexico. There's a lot of know your client rules. There's a lot of anti-money laundering rules, and the process is probably something that you have not encountered in any other country if you've done business internationally. It's not common. It's not uncommon for the process to be extended, right? Into weeks or months at a time in order to get the bank account. Right now, all banks maintain their own policies, especially when we're talking about foreign clients. So the issue is, you may go to one branch and they tell you one set of standards and one set of documents, and then you may go to another branch and they tell you another one, or you go to another executive, they tell you one set of standards, and then you change from the office, from the branch, from the region. So there's a lot of inconsistency with how banking policies are applied for the purposes of opening your bank account. But let's go over some of the more common restrictions or common challenges that we have. So in many cases, many cases, you'll see banks will require a Mexican signatory or foreign signatory who has a temporary residence card or a permanent residence card, right? So that means if you're sitting in you're the headquarters of the company in London or in Shanghai, you cannot sign your own banking documents because many of the banks are going to require you to be a Mexican signatory or a resident foreigner. That's one impediment. Not all the time, but in most cases that will be the case. Verification of address or physical visit to the office. Okay, it's very common for these companies or for these banks to not only require you to say, okay, simply, well, here, my office is here at this street, at this office, suite number A or suite letter A. What they want to do is, in most cases, they'll have to go out and do a physical verification visit, knock on the door, shake everybody's hand, see if it's a legitimate operation, and do a visual confirmation of the company's operations. Very common, and it can cause problems and cause delays. Require foreign partners to have temporary or permanent residence. We were opening up an account for somebody at another company than another bank than the one that we usually use. We advised the client against it, but they wanted to, and they couldn't end up opening up the account because the bank, they said, okay, well, we have foreigners who are owning the company. So where are these foreign owners' residence cards? Well, they're not resident in Mexico. So why do they need residence card? Well, no, it's a policy of the bank, they said. You need to have the residence card, a permanent residence card or temporary residence card if they're foreigners. Anyway, that's a very common impediment. Face-to-face signature. We've had clients who've flown in from India, from the Netherlands, for a signature of the documents at the bank branch for literally a meeting for 5 minutes. So you're flying in, thousands of dollars to come in, and you have to go and you have to sign the documents in front of the banker for 5 minutes and then fly back. We've had that situation happen before. Identification of all beneficial owners of the company. A company or banks like HSBC, this is a very, very common issue where they want to identify all the beneficial owners of the beneficial owners of the beneficial owners. That means the shareholders of the shareholders of the shareholders up to a certain percent with all the corresponding documentation. So, these are some of the common things that you will find, not to scare anybody, but yeah, it can cause serious problems for, somebody who's seeking to begin operations in a timely manner. But I think one of the biggest things is that you find a lot of executives who just don't have experience dealing with foreign clients, right? And so they assume, the same documents for a Mexican citizen are the same documents they're looking for a foreign national, and then whatnot, and it causes complications. So there's lack of experience. But in many cases, you can see the bank account opening process extended up to 2 months. I mean, we've seen that with some people before. But make sure that you have a bank that knows foreign clients, that if there's a way to get into the unit that deals specifically with foreign clients, then do that. Otherwise, it sort of ends up going on and on, things like that. Okay, so make sure you are getting the right help. this is very important, and learning how to choose the right help in Mexico is very, very important, right? So finding a specialist, right? Find a specialist who has experience dealing with the international aspects of things, of issues, of whatever they are doing. So if you find a lawyer, you want to make sure that you have someone who is experienced in corporate and in the international aspects of corporate law, right? And then if you're hiring an accountant, you want to make sure that you have an accountant who is specialized, not necessarily specialized, but who has the sophistication to deal with the international aspects of your operations, and who can address your needs. Okay, and so I think that's very, very, very important. So a lot of times people will say, well, okay, well, I can do, I can complete the process for you. I can be your lawyer or your accountant, but they don't have the specialized knowledge, right? Don't be afraid also to find different professionals at different levels. For example, somebody at the beginning for the incorporation, for handling the legal work, and then somebody handling your product registrations and all the legal requirements for that later on. Don't be afraid to sort of mix and match, and to find specialists at the particular phase of your project. But so let's just compare the costs. I think one of the things that really takes people off guard, that catches people off guard, is the fact that professional services in Mexico are expensive. Running a company in Mexico and forming a company in Mexico, it's expensive, right? So a lot of times when clients come from the United States, especially from the States, especially from these from jurisdictions where it doesn't cost a whole lot to start a company, they're shocked, right? So let's just take a look, right? Comparing to the US prices, you can establish a US entity for $200, depending on what state you're going to, or if you have a lawyer involved, it can be maybe $1,000, right? So $200 to $1,000, we're talking about really the maximum for starting a company in the States, unless you're getting into some sort of sophisticated structuring and things like that. Now, establishing a company in Mexico, on the other hand, you can't really do it for less than $2,000. There's just too many steps involved. There's too many moving pieces and parts that need to align in order to do that. And just the registration fees are several hundreds or thousands of dollars, depending on where you go. So you're looking to set up a legal entity, you're looking at between $2,000 and $5,000, right? And that will vary, right? One of the things that also, so not just the initiation, not just the initial fees, but also the sort of ongoing fees, right? Because of the way the Mexican tax system is structured, you have to file taxes every single month. What we have, or what we consider in other countries as just an annual tax filing that's done, at one time per year. In Mexico, you have to do the equivalent of that every single month, right? And the Mexican government has its own proprietary information technology platforms that are used in order to file taxes. So you can't really do it on your own, even if you wanted to. You hire an accountant to do it. And the fact is, you're doing this on a monthly basis and not an annualized basis, means that it's a significant increase in operating expenditures for anyone wishing to come to the Mexican market, right? So if you're looking at the US as an example, right, we say maybe just a standard business, $500 a year, somebody to do your taxes, H&R Block or whatever the case may be, or to $2,000 for a standard business. That's a one-time fee per year that you have to pay at tax season. In Mexico, what you're looking at really is at least $2,400 up to $8,000 a year, depending on who you get to do your taxes. And so what that translates into is at least $200 a month to $660 dollars a month. It just depends, and it varies in that range. Some companies like your BDOs or your PricewaterhouseCoopers are going to charge significantly higher than that, of course. But the point is, you have to take into account these monthly costs, and don't be surprised if you see them, right? Now, How do these prices vary? Well, obviously the considerations of the law firm or the accounting firm that you're hiring. If your company has employees, the price will be higher. If your company is going to be importing products, there's certain complications in that, which means that you might be forced to pay higher fees. And the number and frequency of transactions, right? Because everything is filed electronically, all sales in Mexico, for them to be tax deductible, have to be accompanied by what we call an electronically filed invoice, which has the digital seal of the company. So you can imagine if you're a company that has thousands of transactions, right? That presents certain complexities. And so that obviously is going to increase your fees from your accountants. Okay, going down. So structuring the project, I will just speak briefly about this. But finding out the right manner, the correct manner to organize your product is very important. So let's take a look here. Make sure that all of your agreements are in writing. I think in Mexico, one of the big things is the handshake deal, right? And that's very good. But I think because of the complexities of certain things and the potential for differences in how business culture works and things like that, it really is best to not go with the handshake deal, at least at once the project is sort of underway. You want to make sure you get everything in writing, with all your default risk and your risk mitigation, everything well planned out and lined up. Using a local partner or agent. Now, one of the good things is, you can use a local partner or agent as sort of, getting your foot in the door. But the problem is you sort of lose control of your project at that point, right? And then you might be marketing a product under the name of the local partner or the local agent. So really, you end up, it may be a good idea using a local agent as an initial stage. And we see a lot of people use that as sort of the initial beginning phases of their project. Or you can create a joint venture. That's also another good way. So that means you actually create a legal entity in Mexico for legal purposes of enter into joint venture agreements, or having a legal entity in which you and your local partner are partners within the same legal entity as the special investment vehicle. And that way you can maintain maximum control while getting the benefit of the local know-how and knowledge. Okay. So now let's talk about this for a second. The tech industry, payroll, and human resources. Now I added tech industry in because in the context of payroll and human resources, because it's one of the hot topics right now. There's a lot of companies that are coming from all over the world, that are coming from India, that are coming from the US, who are engaging in nearshoring and looking to hire US, Mexican talent in the tech industry and related industries and whatnot. But I figured it was good to consolidate. So just to give you, we won't talk about this too much, but so Mexico as a hub for opportunities in the technology industry. So one of the main attractions here, there's a large pool of IT professionals who are bilingual, and most people who are in the IT industry are usually completely fluent in both English and Spanish. There's where we are in Guadalajara, it's the tech hub. Okay, it's the Silicon Valley of Mexico, and so you'll find lots of companies: HCL, Tata, Hewlett Packard, IBM, Oracle. This city it's filled with these large skyscrapers with the names of all these tech companies all around. And there's a reason why these companies have come down here, right? So there's proximity to the United States and Canada. You have access to South America. Also, this cultural familiarity. There's competitive wages and salaries. So there's many opportunities in Mexico, specifically in the tech industry, that can be very attractive. Okay. So for example, we have an information technology recruiting area within our company. And so some of the things that we see are Java developers, full stack developers, automation testers, all these sort of buzzwords with these platforms that are very common in the tech industry. There are plenty of opportunities to hire very experienced professionals across a wide range of different platforms and applications in Mexico that can be very attractive. We have lots of clients who actually shifted a lot of Indian clients who came in who shifted. Who said, well, we want to be able to address the North American market a little better. So they expanded into, and we've helped them expand into Mexico and hire a bunch of testers and talent here locally. And what you're looking for compared to some other jurisdictions, you're looking at a salary range. In most cases, between $2,000 to maybe $4,000 a month for very, very talented people that would be significantly higher in labor costs elsewhere. All right, so now let's go into sort of the nuts and bolts of things. So the main requirements of Mexican labor legislation. So this is something really have to be careful here. There are certain complications in Mexican labor law, human resources, different labor standards that need to be taken into account. And let's talk about this. So first, the required government benefits. Mexico has a very extensive human resources state benefits allotment, right? So public health insurance when you're working, retirement funding, public housing benefits, daycare, life insurance, disability insurance, paid off vacations and vacation premium, extra pay for vacation, 2-week annual bonus benefits at the end of the year. So that's an extra year-end salary bonus that employees receive. These are just some of the basic things, right? And then we have to talk about what really makes it complicated is administering all of these different benefits, right? So that's where the price for the actual accounting and the professional service that are required for compliance increase, because we have to administer these. So basically, these contributions for these state benefits are paid in part by the employee, and in another part, they're paid by the employer. And then the benefits or the deductions are paid on a monthly and a bi-monthly basis, right? So the responsible authorities for administering these benefits, you're going to hear these a lot if you ever come down and do business in Mexico. The IMSS, which is the Mexican Social Security Institute, and also the Institute of the National Housing Fund for Workers, Infonavit. These are the two most common authorities with which you will be interacting if you have employees in Mexico. So this is a good point. So let's take a look at the different types of wage breakdowns that we can see. I'm just going to scoot over here. So let's see, to give you an idea. Now we said, this is a calculator that we have on our site. I'll pass the link later on. But so we talked about the different types of benefits. Now we're going to look at the different types of cost involved from a sort of elementalized, and then also how that's shared between the employer and the employee. So let's take a common salary here. So let's say the employee here is going to be, for 1 month, they're going to be making 75,000 pesos, which is about $3,200. No, $3,500 per month, right? I think there. Okay, so this is basically an overview of the employees' benefits and also their taxes. So if they're making 75,000, they're going to have to pay 1,719 pesos in income taxes, that we call ISR, which is income tax in Mexico. Then we have the benefits contribution, which is different from their taxes. Social Security, they're gonna have to pay 2,175 pesos, right? So in total taxes, this employee is going to be paying 19,894 pesos. And so once you get down from 75,000 pesos, you get all the way down to 55,105 pesos as the employee's actual take-home income. Okay. Now, the important or the most interesting thing, what everybody wants to know, is the employer's side that they have to benefit. They have to pay in terms of benefits. So we have the base salary of $75,000, 75,000 pesos, I'm sorry. And then there's Social Security and their public housing credit, right? This is just an overview, but basically they're going to have to pay of that 75,000. You're looking to have to pay you as the employer out of pocket 16,113 pesos. So that's in addition to the base pay of 75,000. On top of that, you pay the 16,000, and you see a total real cost of employment is 91,113 pesos, and we can see the split here, right? Here we go. Total in taxes, 36,007 pesos, and we have the employer who pays 16,113, and then on this side, the employee who pays 19,894. So a little breakdown there, but you get an idea. I think the biggest thing that you want to take home from this is that, yeah, I mean, you know, taxes in Mexico for wages can be expensive. So one of the things also to look at is the labored employment. Remember, in most cases, you will have to pay, if you decide to get rid of an employee, keep in mind, you have to risk mitigate, because there's a 3-month severance pay requirement for any employee who's dismissed unjustified, right? But the question is, what does justified dismissal mean? So we start from the thing that we say that in most cases, the idea of at-will employment in Mexico does not exist, right? You just can't get rid of an employee for whatever reason without having to pay the 3-month severance pay. So the only way that we can avoid paying severance pay in most cases is if the employee has missed 3 days in 1 month, if they've committed or threatened to commit any acts of violence in the workplace to employees or to superiors or whatnot, failure to respect safety and risk measures, incarceration, right? There's a few other, but these are the primary reasons that you could justify. But anything else that doesn't fall into these limited circumstances is considered an unjustified dismissal for which 3 months severance pay must be paid. And so one of the most important things is non-compliance with expectations or job performance. These are not grounds for dismissal, right? And then in that case, if they're not working out just because the employee is not competent, you still have to pay the 3 months severance pay. Now, how we can get around that is by either using temporary contracts where we have a fixed period, fixed beginning date, fixed end date, or we have the labor agreement fixed to a specific project. We can get around having to pay that 3 month severance pay. Or if you have, for example, what we do is, depending on the nature of the project or the employant, you can have a trial period for the employee of either 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months. And that depends on certain things. You know, it's a technical position, if they have a specialized knowledge, if they're managerial or whatnot. So you can implement, you know, a plan where you have either 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months of probation or training period there. Okay, onboarding foreign employees, very important. So in most cases, you know, if you want to be able to bring an executive in from a foreign company and sponsor their visa, and they're going to be staying for over 180 days or something like that, maybe managing the office, the company needs to be registered first, and then it needs an immigration registration. That process can take about a month, right? And then once you have the company registered, then we have to extend to the employee overseas a job offer, and we have to do a process here in Mexico again, where we say, okay, we submit all the paperwork, copy of the passport, the job description for the employee who's going to be coming into Mexico. That process needs to be completed here, and then after that is approved within Mexico, then the information is sent to the consulate of their choice anywhere outside of Mexico, and then the employee must have a consular visit, and they put a stamp in their passport, and they can come in. So there's a two-step process. First, the employee registration, and then the actual visa application for the employee with their consular visit. And then after they come back into the country, we have to do what they call a change of identification, where they take the stamp in the passport with the picture, and they give you an identification card. That process in Mexico, once you're in Mexico, usually takes about 3 weeks to complete. Okay, so the last section here, we're going to be talking briefly about importation of products and the different regulations surrounding them. So basically, I think one of it's very important here to get the process right. So you want to get started with a customs broker, right? I think that's probably where people tend to put the chicken before the egg, right? It's where you don't want to wait till the company is formed and or you're ready to import the product to actually check with your customs broker. The customs broker really should be one of the first people you speak to in Mexico, right? Because that allows us to identify the import restrictions on the product, execute any modifications of the product that we need, and to request any permits or authorizations. So don't get caught off guard. I think it's very important to put the customs broker not at the end of the process, but at the very beginning, right? So common procedures to import products. Again, this is sort of just an example that I've taken. So there's electronic products very commonly imported. So electronic products have to be imported and comply with Mexican norms. These norms are what we call norms, normativas mexicanas, all right? And they basically are product standards and regulations, voltage things, labeling requirements, safety requirements, certification requirements. So your products that come in, and this is not only applicable to electronic products, but there's norms that apply to everything. But just for the sake of argument here, we're taking a look at electronic products. But so in this case, for example, let's say we're, depending on the type of product it is and what tariff classification was assigned to the product from our customs broker, we know if there's a label requirement, right? And the label requirement almost always applies, where we have to, have voltage and risks and use warnings and things like that. But there's also other areas, other products and tariff lines that might require you to have a laboratory certification that says, right, that says the voltage is what it says, that attests to its risks, and they give you a certificate. Now that certificate would have to be issued by an accredited laboratory. But you don't know. It just depends on what tariff line you're talking about and what type of electronic you're talking about. But the point is, this can generate higher costs, at least, a couple of $100. And it depends on if you can basically group together your products. If you have several products that are similar in their characteristics, then the possibility exists of grouping together those products. But the point is, if you are importing electronic products, you just need to know that this cost can come up specifically. Okay, now let's take a look really quickly on basically. So this is why I say it's very important to go and to look at the broker first. Ask them about what your tariff classification is at the very beginning, because they will give you a readout just like this. Well, they'll show you the tariff classification. They'll show you what you have to pay. This is a tax, the IVA, which is a sales tax in Mexico that you have to pay at the border. All right, all the different restrictions, all the different applicable. This is the NOM we were talking about, the NOM, the norma, the product regulations. So we can actually pull that up and we can consult that and see what it actually means, right? But you see, in this case, also the different tariff levels for the various trade territories. For in many cases, wherever we see an X here, that means it's exempt from any type of tariff. But the point is, you'll see this if you work with your customs broker. They'll need to do a very good classification, and they'll give you something like this, where you'll see everything clearly laid out, so you know what challenges are coming for you, if any. Right? That's the most important thing, and it allows us to plan accordingly. But as food for thought, just okay. The products that you want to be on the lookout for if you're going to be importing, and these are the ones that are going to have certain restrictions on them. If we're talking about automotive parts, because Mexico is an automotive manufacturing country, and so if you're looking at the automotive industry, there's some restrictions that are going to be put into place. Textiles, footwear, hydrocarbons, or we call it like petroleum products, iron and steel, or steel-derived products, footwear, certain chemicals, or derivative of chemicals, things like that are going to require what's called a specific sectors registration. And there's certain complications involved with that. They sort of want to know where the product came from outside of the country, where it's going to be sent to within Mexico, with all the registrations, the quantity, the location of the warehouse for your clients and guys. It's a little bit of a slightly mess hidden restriction on trade as a protectionist measure. But if you're engaging in any of these these products, distributing them within Mexico, expect there to be certain complications with the specific sector's permit. If you're importing anything that has to do with cosmetics or medicines, also there's certain restrictions on their importation as well, where they're required to get chemical analysis and laboratory for the purpose of getting the import permit. And so and other products have everything that could be a sanitary license. So I mean, it just depends on the type of product. But if you look at this list here, you pretty much have a good idea about which products are going to provide you perhaps some difficulties, and so you can know that beforehand. Okay, so I really wanted to thank our country manager Surajit Roy. I put his 2 email addresses there. Make sure to use both those email addresses if you have any questions, and the phone number for him as well. And then also my information here. We are going to stick around for a little bit and take some of your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you for everyone who was able to organize the event today. And so let's open up the floor for any questions that the participants have.
Thank you, Mr. John, for this extensive presentation. So I request our Mr. R R.Padmanabhan, the Chairman of Foreign Trade Committee, to please take up the moderation with question and answers which are put in the chat box. The floor is open for question and answers. People who want to raise the questions, please feel free to raise it. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, got it. Anybody has any questions? Mr. John has taken totally, in about 45-50 minutes, he's done a wonderful presentation of what Mexican business is all about, how to establish a company, and what are the import procedures. It's almost like what we have in India, but then Mexico is very, very important country. Whoever is willing to do business with US, Canada, and South American countries. Plus, another important thing that we have in our mind is China is one of the very big suppliers to Mexico. So China being our neighbor, if China can do it, why not we? That's a question.
Yeah.
Any questions, anything you want to discuss with Mr. John, please put it in the chat box. There is how much minimum investment need for open trading? That's a question, Mr. John.
So there really is no minimum amount for opening for trading. So for example, when you define your company's articles of incorporation, you say that's a share capital. So most companies will say like with 3,000 pesos as a share capital. It's about $150. In other cases, they'll say 50,000 pesos, which is like the equivalent of $2,500. But the point is, this amount actually does not need to be deposited in anywhere, right? So in some companies, for example, I believe in the Netherlands, when you start a company, you say, well, we have $100,000 in share capital, then you have to deposit $100,000 in some place or another. In Mexico, that does not apply. So my answer to the question would be that there's no minimum share capital in order to open up a company. It's an accounting value. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. How about having a branch in Mexico? Same law applies, Mr. John. Having a branch in Mexico.
This is a very, very good, excellent question. And because in theory, in many cases, you say, well, the opening up a branch is easy, right? You say you register the company, get your tax ID number, and instead of going through the trouble of establishing a legal entity. The problem is branches in Mexico are not useful. Right. In my opinion, right. The thing is, you can open up a branch. They call it a permanent establishment. But the thing is, it's the same amount of paperwork. When you open up your company, a legal entity, I have to ask for your apostille documents. Everything needs to be legalized. In India, for example, if I ask you to open, we need a copy of your bylaws, a copy of your certificate of incorporation. It all has to be apple sealed by the local chamber of commerce for the state. But those procedures change depending on the country, and then we have to send those documents over to Mexico, and then we have to go through a process called protocolization with a notary, where it becomes part of the public record. You get basically a local certificate of incorporation. This process is the same if you're talking about opening up a branch or you're talking about opening up a legal entity. It's the same burden. It's the same paperwork. So in my opinion, there's no advantage for using a branch. You still have to have the monthly tax filings. You still have to have the local registered agent. They still have to have the local registered office. So it doesn't make any sense to me.
Is there any good demand for Indian spices, sir? Now that the food similarities are there, because India is the land of the spices.
Well, there's always, Mexico has a very, very rich gastronomy, right? And so I would always say that there's a market for spices. And every time one of our clients comes in from India, I always take them to one of the great Indian restaurants that we have in the city. And, they like to compare. So I would say, yes, bring the spices, I'll buy them.
Okay, fine. Any special provisions for pharma companies?
Pharma.
The same law, whatever you said, no? For pharma, pharmaceutical.
Yeah, right. I mean, so it varies depending on what type of product. If you're talking about a supplement, if you're talking about any type of, if you're talking about medicines, depending on what type of medicine it is, there can be complications, right? That's one of the more difficult things to import. It's not the shit you can't. Many people do it, but the point is, what happens when you have to, when you get a product that requires a clinical study, right? Because there are certain products that will require you to repeat your clinical study in Mexico with volunteers and everything like that, and your free sale certificates and everything. So in my advice, we have represented pharmaceutical companies in the past. You just have to be careful about picking the product that is going to have the least amount of regulation, because if you get a local sanitary requirement where you have to do the volunteers, that's going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
Acha, in a nutshell, how long does it, of course, let's say it's not pharma, a normal company, I mean, without much of government regulations after the incorporation, how long does it take to get the company incorporated and the bank account open? Because I see even bank account opening takes a lot of regulations,
Yeah, and you're right. It depends on who you go with. Period. It depends on who you go with as the lawyer and who you are incorporating with, because it varies. In our case, for our company, we have a very, very strict timeline. So that is, once we receive your documentation in Mexico, right? It takes us 3 weeks to get the company formed and the tax registration done. And then after that, it takes about another 2.5 weeks to get the bank account, maybe 3 weeks to get the bank account going, depending on a few factors. COVID has sort of, changed things up. But 3 weeks for the company, and then another 2.5, 3 weeks for the bank accounts.
So I would assume is about 2 months' time, 8 weeks maximum.
We always say about 1.5 months. Give yourself 1.5 months, lead time. Now, just remember, one of the most important things is when you're getting the documentation, we send you a list of documents that you need to get apostilled and signed.
Agreed.
A lot of people they take time to get that.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been wonderful, Mr. John. You've taken us. It's as if a trip to Mexico we could have. It's fantastic. You've gone through the entire process, and we are very, very happy that you brought the entire Mexico to our hands, and the interesting labor laws and the import process, and one more thing. See, I just did some Googling before we start the program. For the benefit of the viewers, Mexico has been viewed as the #1 country for investment. It's the #1 country for investment, followed by some other like Lithuania, then Malaysia, like this. But #1 is Mexico. The study has been done by Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania and the BAV group. So obviously quite a lot of investment activity must be going on there, and we have the right person, Mr. John, with us. He is our man there, and in fact, Mr. Surijit Roy is here in India. So whoever is interested to take care of this, to look into Mexico as an investment destination or to do business, yes, you are welcome. Of course, route the whole thing through chamber so that we'll come to know for the statistical purpose that so many of the people who are not members, I welcome all of them to become members of Andhra Chamber of Commerce. We have lots of this kind of programs coming up now and then, and we'll keep you informed. And any requests to Mr. Roy, let it be routed through chamber so that we have statistics of who are the beneficiaries of the program. And thank you very much, John. Whenever you plan to visit in India, you are welcome to visit our states. We are in southern part of India, almost southern part. We are in 3 states, as she said. I will organize some more programs for you when you are here in physical. We are physically here. Thank you very much, and have a good luck, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Only one question. I think there is somebody who was from Delight Exports has said that is there any free trade policy from Mexico and France, between Mexico and France?
Yes, there's the European Union Free Trade Agreement.
There is a free trade agreement, right? And then one more question is it possible to get buyer list for agricultural products? Because a couple of members who have participated today are into agriculture, so they want to know whether there is a possibility to get any buyers list of for agricultural products from Mexico.
Buyers lists for agricultural products. I mean, that could be, that could be done. We have clients who are from India specifically that market agricultural products. So yes, there is a market for it, and it would just be a question of getting, putting together a buyers list. I think the American Chamber of Commerce also the various chambers of commerce in India, in Mexico, are also good resources for finding and connecting with buyers.
Okay. So with that, we thank you very much for for your extensive presentation. It was very good, well covered as far as the business prospects is concerned. So I hope the participants would have got benefited out of this. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present an e-memento to Mr. John. I request my colleague, Ms. Madhu, to please share the e-memento.
Thank you. I should mention one thing. I will very likely be in India in January.
Oh, you're welcome, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Madhu? there is some technical hitch, I believe. So I would like to send this e-memento by mail to Mr. John.
That would be, thank you very much.
I would be very happy to send you that. So I thank all the participants for staying back with us for the program. For any clarifications, please feel free to write to us. And I request Mr. John to please share the presentation so that we can pass it on to the participants. I thank Mr. John for this wonderful session. I thank Mr. Surjit Rai to put us together for this program, because he has been instrumental in organizing this. He has been after me for the last, I think, more than 3 months or 4 months, because we were so preoccupied with our other programs that we could not organize it earlier. Sorry about it. Thank you, Mr. Rai. I thank our Mr. R R.Padmanabhan for staying with us. I think she has succeeded, or I think so. This is only the invitation. This is the invitation, Madhu.
It's very beautiful.
No problem, sir. We will be sending it to you by mail. This is only the invitation. We'll send you a small e-memento, because as a token of our appreciation, we thank you once again for staying with us and for an extensive presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.